Hello, my name is Andrea Fincher, and I am happy to be in course 8115 Systemic Approaches to Addiction. So, in accordance with week one homework, I will be answering these 5 questions um, from the board. The first question is: what, if any, experience do you have in your professional work with addiction? Um, as relates to my professional work, I have worked in many facilities with addiction wards where they treat patients with addictions. Heroin addiction seems to be one of the major ones that we are facing here in the city. You see a lot of heroin addicts in these wards of these facilities trying to detox off of heroin. And trying to get their lives together and put forth an effort to live an addiction free life. So, in doing that, I've been around these people. I've seen what the addiction does to them, how it affects their mental processes, how it completely takes over their life and makes pretty much their entire life, their entire being, everything they do, everything they seek, everything they talk about the um, acquiring that drug to feed that habit, to feed that need, as it becomes even more important to them than eating or sleeping. As it relates to the second question, what, if any, experience do you have in your personal life with addiction? That's a loaded question there. Having worked with people with addictions, I guess that would depend upon your definition of addictions. You can see all types of addictions. Some can be positive and some can be negative. Um, in my life, living in the inner city and being from the inner city in the urban community, being an African American female, you see a lot of different addictions. Be it to shopping. I have friends that are addicted to being in school. They just like attending college, so they pursue degree after degree after degree. You could possibly consider that an addiction. Um, there's also a lot of controversy in the community about marijuana use being an addiction. I have friends on the side of that debate that say that marijuana is not an addictive substance. It's a natural plant. It's just like tobacco, although we know that tobacco can be addictive too. Um, but they feel like because it grows naturally from the ground, it's not manufactured in a laboratory, that it shouldn't be classified as an addiction. Um, I personally see an addiction as anything that takes over your focus. If you feel like you need it to get up in the morning, you need it to function, you need it to have a good day, so to speak, then to me that becomes your addiction. Um, Now, whether that addiction has positive outcomes or negative outcomes depends on the source of that addiction. So, in my personal life, I tend to struggle with how I look at addictions, because I do know avid users who will adamantly claim that they are not addicted to marijuana. They can stop at any point. But in the same sentence and at the same token, they say they need it to have a good day. They need it to be calm. They need it to function. Um, so you're telling me that this addiction you have, this substance you need, is not an addiction, but in the same sentence you're saying you need it just to function. That is the definition of an addiction to me. So I tend to struggle with that, especially, like I said, especially in the African American community. Um, Marijuana use is so avid and so rampant. I can almost say everyone knows at least one person who uses marijuana, who claims they're not addicted to it, they can stop, who claims that marijuana isn't a drug, so to speak. Um, and in the same token, those same people who may use marijuana, who may be addicted to marijuana, will look down on other users, saying that they're the addicts because of what that particular drug, how that particular drug devastates their life. Um, they tend to feel like marijuana doesn't have a devastating effect. It doesn't make you lose cars. It doesn't make you lose your job. It doesn't make you sell your house. It doesn't make you um, do negative things like, try and sell your kids to drug dealers just to get another hit. So they tend to think that marijuana is a golden drug, I guess you could say, that it is above the negative side effects of all of the other drugs. So yes, I do struggle with how I view, addictions in relation to it. Um, this is, what are your initial impressions of working with addiction clients? I think and having that conversation with my friends and family members, I can say I understand that addictive personality, um, and how that addiction becomes the need that feeds your life function. So my initial impressions of working with addictive clients is um they they need help for one. But I can also say that usually I find when dealing with addicted clients that there's always an underlying cause. There's always an underlying reason that led them to that particular choice. Usually it's because of a lack of coping skills, and that becomes their coping technique of choice. Delving into that particular addiction or drug, or be it gambling, be it shopping, be it food, um, is their way of escaping what they cannot cope with. So, when dealing with these clients, I think my initial reaction is trying to figure out what per se is that coping mechanism that they are lacking, or what are they failing to cope with. Um, what are your fears, worries, and concerns about working with addictive clients and their families? Like I said, that my one major fear would be that marijuana debate. Because I can't say that I have truly solidified my personal stance on marijuana as an addiction, or marijuana as a negative addiction, so to speak. Let me clarify that. I think that would be my biggest fear and worry with working with clients who have that particular drug as an issue in addiction. I know my sister just um, dealt with that. That was one of the issues in her marriage, where she felt like marijuana use was becoming a problem and taking up too much finances in their marriage, and that became an issue. Um, in the same token, my sister used to smoke marijuana, so it became an issue of, how can you tell me not to do something that you've done? How can you tell me what I'm doing is wrong when you used to do it? So, weighing in on that and seeing her go through that, it does worry me. Having clients who have the issue, because I mean, in one instance, I see that if it is causing a destructive force in your life, then it is something that needs to be resolved. It is something that needs to be gotten a handle on. But in the same token, you have people who are perfectly fine doing it, who don't allow it to take over their life. Um, it becomes maybe their relaxation technique. And it doesn't control their life. It doesn't affect them negatively. They don't spend over half their income on acquiring marijuana. Um, they still function perfectly normally in society. Sometimes you would never know unless they told you. So that kind of duality does worry me when dealing with clients of that nature. When it comes to our other addictions, like I said, my biggest concern is finding out what is this addiction um, keeping you from coping with? What are you using this addiction to cope for. What in your life do you not want to deal with, that is causing you to use addiction as a scapegoat. Um, this is reaction to one piece of new information learned in this week's reading. I was quite surprised, after reading this week's reading, how many people were kind of adverse to the new DSM 5. It Upon glancing at it and looking at it, I can't say I agree with the author. I was ecstatic that they had added gambling as, an addiction. Cities with casinos and gambling halls, we know all too well the trouble of having a gambling addiction. People lose their houses, cars, whole lives in a casino gambling. So I was quite happy to see that they had included that in the addiction section. Um, the brain disease versus social psychotherapy debate. I understand the debate. I can truly say that I do agree that it's not a brain disease, that it is a psychosocial aspect. It is something that needs to be dealt with in the social and psychosocial realm. And with that, I guess I can say that in dealing with it that way, you can then bring in, all of those environmental factors, those social factors, those familial um factors that all contribute to um the kind of complete picture of an addiction. Um, Kind of looking at it one-sided as it's a disruption in neurotransmitters, and kind of looking at it from that physical standpoint, I think you miss the other factors, and you miss a chance to impact those other factors that are included in addiction, like those familial connections, those stressors in life, those um, social stressors, those cultural stressors that kind of impact whether or not the your addictive personality kind of erupts in your life, and what that addiction manifests as. So I could say I totally agree with that author and his stance on that, because I've seen people who say that it isn't a disability, it's just a personal problem. In that instance, I mean, I can understand the sentiment that it is a personal problem, because it is a personal choice. Some people go through life and they don't necessarily have an addiction, an unhealthy addiction, let's say. Because I personally feel anything that you do in excess can be an addiction, because you are doing it in excess. So with that being said, when you look at it from a physical standpoint only, you miss those emotional and social and cultural triggers that also impact and affect an addictive personality and addictive behavior. And I think to treat addiction, all of those factors have to come into play: the physical, the emotional, the social, the cultural. Everything comes into play when you're trying to treat an addiction, because 9 times out of 10, everything comes into play as in some shape, form, or fashion in the cause of that addiction. One of the main things that kind of stood out to me was the fact that they used Vietnam War veterans and their dalliances with heroin, and when they were in the war, and how once they came home, returned home from active duty, they were able to completely stop and never touch the drug again. I think that in itself kind of proves that addiction is not just a physiological or physical problem, that it's something they're disrupting in the emotional and social standpoint that causes an addiction to manifest and to begin to disrupt your life and get it to the point of it being a disability. So those are kind of my thoughts on and where I am in the addiction debate. Look forward to hearing from you and talking to you and learning more in this course. Thank you.